A warning in the beginning of this video to anyone who wishes to attempt the top dead center mod. Keep in mind this is not a step-by-step tutorial, so make sure to give the video a once-over, as in watch it all of the way through before trying to attempt to do anything on your rifle. Then you can go back and take it step by step, because there are some steps that I briefly skip over but then come back to. So be absolutely certain that you do not do that. One prime example. Before you start drilling this, there is a block inside of this rifle. I skip over it and don't tell you to remove it, but I come back to it. So make sure that you do not drill anything into your rifle until you know that you've taken that block out. Fair warning given, I am not a professional. Alright guys, before this top dead center mod begins, I'm going to show you everything that you should need to be able to get it underway. First off, you're going to need just a standard pen, something that you can mark with that you know isn't going to rub off very easily. Mine rubs a little bit later in this video, as you'll see, and it's a bit of a pain, so I'd recommend Sharpie or something that isn't going to smudge. Next, you're going to need a set of hex keys, something to get your rifle apart with. Now, most every airsofter has these at some point, and even the Tokyo Marui VSR-10, I believe, comes with a set to take it apart, so you shouldn't have to worry too much about these. Now, these are the primary pieces that you're going to need for this build. This is a 10x32 drill bit for threading. This will come later in the video whenever you're actually using your screw, your screw to actually press down on your hop-up nub and give you that little bit of extra hop-up that you're looking for to handle those heavier BBs. And you're going to need a drill bit that is slightly smaller than that. That way you have a pilot hole for this drill bit to actually give threads to. Now, this is optional. I use this in the video solely so that I can cut this tape a little bit easier when it's up against the rifle, instead of having to use scissors, which is a good bit more difficult, but I'll explain that a good bit later. It's good to have one of these anyway, but if you're not comfortable with using one, I wouldn't recommend trying. Otherwise, it's solely optional. It's up to you. I have a metal ruler because I know I can trust this thing not to bend on me. It's about a 6-inch ruler, so that way I don't have to worry about it. Scissors. Scissors are important. You're going to need those. And painter's tape. I prefer using painter's tape over masking tape just because it comes off of the rifle easier and I don't have to worry about it taking away any of my paint. Other than that, that should be everything that you need for this build. If I think of anything later, which I don't believe there's anything else that you should need, I'll let you know then. See you there. Alright, hey there you guys, it's Star10. You're here to talk about today how I did my top dead center mod on my Tokyo Marui VSR-10. Now, this rifle, I've used it quite a bit. I haven't actually put any gameplay of it up yet, but it actually has performed very well with the top dead center mod. I did this solely so I would be able to use heavier gram BBs out of this rifle, preferably Geoff's .36 gram BBs. They've given me the best performance out of any by far. I'll try and put the link in the description for those. But you'll notice this is the key part right here that we're talking about today. I'll go ahead and take it out for the purposes of showing you what I used. Right there is where I installed my top dead center mod. You'll notice the hole in the top that I drilled and threaded. I'll talk to you about how exactly to get that where you want it, measuring and all that. But for now, this is the piece that I actually used as my top dead center bolt. This I got at Lowe's, I believe. It was a thumb screw. They're pretty easy to find, fairly cheap as well. Now, you won't find them exactly the length that you need them. I will warn you about that now. I actually did have to cut mine down to size. Now, you probably could use a hacksaw. I used a Dremel tool just because I wanted that little bit of precision, so fair warning there. You don't have to cut it. You can use it at the size that they give you, but it will probably stick up a little bit more off of your rifle than you're wanting it to. So fair warning about that, but this is the setup that I was doing. Alright, now back to the rifle itself. First thing you're going to need to do, you're going to need to take off any attachments that you had onto the rifle, as well as remove the magazine. So I'll go ahead and remove the mag right now. I think I can get the scope off pretty easily. Didn't have it on that tight, but tight enough to where it wasn't going to bother me. Now, the camera I'm using up top, I think it was a Mobius camera with a 50mm zoom lens. Now, don't hold that against me if I'm wrong. It's been a little while. And the cord I ran from my sniper, it actually has a battery inside of the stock to keep that camera running a good bit longer. Alright, so now what you're going to need to do. First screws you're actually going to have to take out of your rifle are these two main screws in the body, here and here. So I'll go ahead and take those out and then I'll follow you up from there. Alright guys, I took those two pieces out that we were looking for and I used the hex key to do it, so we should be good to go ahead and disassemble this part of the rifle. The barrel just comes out, and that whole assembly slides out fairly easily. Now we can set this whole piece aside. You don't have to worry about it at all for the top dead center mod. Everything you need, well, you even don't have to worry about the trigger assembly and so forth, is right here. Next thing you're going to have to take apart. There is a screw right here to help hold your barrel in place, keep it from swiveling and so forth. That screw needs to come out next. I'll take that out, and then we'll see you there. Alright, now that screw is out, but it is pretty important, so make sure you keep all of your pieces for this build together. I've even set this over here so I can make sure that I didn't lose it. I've got the two things to hold the entire body together, and then this small screw all next to each other. It's best to have a magnet to hold on to those, that way you're absolutely not at risk of losing them. I won't worry about it for now just because I'm sort of on a pool table, an open surface here. I don't really have to worry about them going anywhere. It's even got a lip right about here to keep them from falling off, so I'm not that worried about it. Now, what you're going to need to do is twist this entire barrel assembly out. I'll go ahead and slide it to the edge of the table, that way I'm not risking bending it. You can unscrew this entire assembly. Shouldn't take but a second. Alright, now it's completely apart off the cylinder. Try and do your best to keep the cylinder clean, otherwise you're going to have to worry about it a lot more later. This is going to keep your rifle clean as well as keep the bolt functioning as it is meant to. Now this is what we have to worry about, and this is what we're working with. Now you can see where I drilled the hole. You shouldn't have to worry about that right now. I'll probably put some masking tape or electrical tape over that. That way I don't have any reference to go off of, and I can teach you simply how to top dead center your rifle. Alright, at this stage in the build, these are the components that you're going to need. You're going to need your painter's tape, your scissors, your pen, your X-ACTO knife if you have one. You don't have to have this, and a ruler. You're going to absolutely need this. So now what you're going to need to do is to cut a piece of tape. Make sure it is completely even. I know here mine's kind of at a slant. Make sure that it is even. You're going to have a flat surface to go off of. What you're basically going to do is right here, this entire assembly, it's about as wide as the painter's tape is. Start the painter's tape at the back and go forward. Any of the give up here you're not going to have to worry about. So start back here and go all the way around the rifle until you reach this point on the other side. I'll go ahead and wrap mine, and I'll explain how I cut it and so forth, and then I'll get back with you then. You'll notice on one side I kept the tape completely flush with that groove. That's why you usually have the X-ACTO knife, and you have to make sure that your tape is flat. So I wrapped it all the way around the barrel, and now I've reached this point. Now it looks a little bit messy. Your job with the X-ACTO knife, or you can use scissors if you're very careful. If you're going to use scissors, mark a line all the way across from one side to the other, letting you know the reference point you have to cut at. If you're using an X-ACTO knife, it makes it easier because you just have to drag it along that line, but make sure that your tape is cut at a straight line. So I'll go ahead and tape that, and then I'll explain why we're doing that as soon as we return. Alright, at this stage, this is how your whole assembly should look. You should have the masking tape lining up with the back ends of this groove over to, I suppose I should point it out. You should have your masking tape lined up with this, the back, not this, the front. You're not as much going to have to worry about that. The masking tape will measure itself, or painter's tape. You've got that back groove there to follow. Now, this screw here is going to be your guide point. Follow it all the way around to the side. This middle bit in between these two metal pieces is where you're going to put your first mark. I'll go ahead and grab the pen and show you where I place mine. First mark should go right about here. I'll try and get it to focus before I do that. All right, there we go. First mark I place is here. And on the opposite side I will place the exact same mark. Going to be a little bit blurry, but I'll place the exact same mark in the dead center. Now, with your tape being perfectly symmetrical on both sides and having both of those marks, you'll be able to take this off as well as measure it. And I'll explain why measuring it's important in just one moment. Well, I can do that now. You're measuring this to find the exact center between these 2 points whenever you take this tape off. And knowing exactly where you put it in the first place is important. So once you put it there, you'll be able to follow that all the way to the center where you'll make a mark after measuring. Then you can place it back on exactly the way you had it before, and you'll have your center point. So you'll place that mark in the center, and that'll be where you'll want to drill your hole. One note I'd like to make, before you take your tape off to measure it and place your mark, Be absolutely certain that you know which end is the front, that way you can actually place it back on your rifle properly. So I'm just going to write front on this end of the tape, that way I know exactly which way to put it back on. Don't judge the handwriting, it's not going to be good. Once measured, the tape should come out to around 2 3/4 of an inch. What that means is you're going to be able to find the point in between. So take 2.75, I'll go ahead and grab this calculator over here. You're going to take 2.75 and multiply that by 0.5 to get to half. So 1.375 comes out as your number. Now what you saw before was me trying to figure out what 0.375 was as a fraction. So that comes out to 3/8. What that means is you're going to 1 3/8 of an inch, and that's where you're going to put your middle mark. So 1 3/8. This is 1/8, 2/8, which is 1/4 of an inch. So this would be 3/8. This is where you'll place your mark. Alright, and that is the dead center where you are going to drill straight down into the rifle to be able to get that spot right where the hop-up arm is and press down on that a little bit more than you'd be able to do with the standard hop-up of VSR-10. Now that your tape has its mark, you should be able to place it on the rifle just as you had it before. And you'll notice, following the middle of this all the way down, it's still aligned perfectly. So right here is where you'll need to drill. So what I find it best to do, now that you have your middle point, draw a circle around it, that way you know exactly where you need to drill. One warning I will give at this stage. When you are drilling into the rifle, be absolutely certain that you are coming straight down onto it. If you drill at an angle and thread it at an angle, you may press down on that hop-up arm with uneven pressure, causing your BB to go to the left or to the right. So be absolutely certain that you drill dead center down into the rifle, as it is the top dead center mod. Best way to do this is if you do have a drill press, which I actually do not, which that's kind of sad, it'd be a great thing to have. But if you do have a drill press, use that instead to go straight down into the rifle. Be sure that it is steady though, and that it is flat. It'll lean a little bit like this. So you'd have to come down at a bit of an angle if you're setting it just like I am right now. Or if you're balancing it, you could drill straight down into the rifle. You're doing that with your drill bit to create your pilot hole. So not the threading bit. The threading bit comes after. Once you've drilled your pilot hole, you'll be able to thread that, and that's when you'll be able to insert your screw. I'll go ahead and take mine off and reveal exactly where the hole that I drilled was. Alright, one thing before you actually do start drilling into your rifle to get the hole like I did here, you're going to need to take this off. You don't want to risk drilling into your hop-up arm and ruining the whole thing. The way to do this is to take these two screws out here and here. That'll remove the block, and then this should slide out of your rifle. Once you have that out, that's when you'll be good to do that mark, drill that hole, and then you'll be able to put the whole thing back together again. Alright, with those two screws removed, you will be able to take the whole thing off, and the barrel assembly should just slide out. Now mine got a little bit firm, so I did actually have to tap it out. I won't be able to remove it with just my hands. You should be able to slide it out. If not, use something that won't damage the metal here to be able to slide it out. You don't want to pry or do anything along those lines that would end up hurting your barrel, because the inner barrel is in there and that's something you really don't want to ruin. So once that's slid all the way out, your tape should still be on at this point in time. You won't have to worry about taking that off. Once all of this inner assembly is out, you'll be able to come over here, drill your hole, then put the whole thing back together again and assemble the rifle just as you had it before. When putting this block back on, it should look just like this, and make sure the hole is aligned right here, because that's where this screw is going to go. Don't have it like this, like too far. You want to have it aligned with that hole. You put the whole thing back together again and it'll be ready to reassemble. And just as you'll see, following that point, I went all the way down and I drilled that hole directly into the barrel of my gun. A warning I will give. This metal that the barrel is made of is a thin aluminum. You can almost see it right there. It doesn't have much to thread with, so whenever you're taking that screw in and out, be absolutely certain that you don't bend it or anything along those lines. Because if you do, you won't be able to get the same precision that you had before. And if you strip the threads on it, you won't be able to do it again unless you do it with a bigger screw, which is going to make it a lot more difficult on you. So fair warning there, be absolutely certain that you're very careful when 1, you're threading it, and 2, you're taking out the screw that you put in the first place. You do not want to strip that spot. Alright, after using this bit to drill the pilot hole, you can then thread it with, I use a 10x32 drill bit. That way I can thread the hole by 10x32, which is what this bolt size is. So now that you have that drilled and threaded, you should be able to assemble the pieces. Like I was mentioning earlier, be careful about which way you put this in. Let's see. I'll try and get it focused. That way you can see a little bit better. If I was to put this in at an angle going one way or the other, I might ruin the threads, and you don't want to do that. So make certain that this is aligned top down into the rifle, and then twist. Alright, it found the threads. Now as soon as you start feeling tension, that means you are adjusting your hop up, and that means you did it right. You can also hear the cat. She's a pain. Alright, so the more you push this screw in, the more hop up you're going to be giving yourself, which is better for heavier BBs. And the less you screw it in, the less hop up you're going to be using. So it's fairly simple and fairly easy to remember. Just remember, clockwise when you're turning this, you're giving yourself more hop up. Counterclockwise, you're doing it less. Now that you have this assembled, you can actually put the rifle back together the same way you had it before. I can go ahead and show you how to do that. It's fairly simple. Alright. First, you'll start with your inner assembly, the inner mechanisms of the rifle, the bolt, the trigger assembly, and so forth. You're going to take this, slide it back over the bolt, and put the threads back in where they're meant to be. Screw this all the way in, and this is where that one screw you took out earlier comes back into play. Once your rifle is all the way threaded, which mine should be momentarily as soon as the paint lines up. Alright, so that would be too far, so that's where it needs to be. Another indicator you may have if you didn't paint your rifle like I did is this hole on the bottom, right here. You should see this lined up with the bottom of that circle, just like that. So I'm going to insert the screw and then we'll continue. Alright, I have reinserted that screw that's holding my barrel together. You'll always notice with this, or at least with mine, there's been a little bit of jitter here from the very beginning. It's never quite tight all the way through there. That's why they add that screw in so that you can tighten down the barrel, that way it won't move. Next part of the reassembly is putting all of this back into your stock. That's probably the easiest part of all this, I'd say. Alright, once everything's resituated, you're good to put the 2 main bolts of the rifle back in. Now the bigger of the 2 bolts always goes towards the back of the rifle, that's where it'll need to be, and the smaller goes towards the front. I'll go ahead and screw these in, and we'll continue. Alright, and with those 2 put back in, you're nearly done with your build. All that's left is to put back on all of your attachments that you had for the rifle. For instance, my scope. I'll go ahead and put that back on right now. And before the video is over, I will actually give you a shooting demonstration. That way you know that 100% this mod did work for me. If you have any questions about it, be sure to leave them in the comments. I'll be happy to answer them. If you think there's anything I missed, any steps, which I don't believe there should be, but if you believe there's something that I left out, I'll be happy to answer any questions you have about it in the comments. Now, one thing I might look at, let me see if it has the dimensions of this tape. If I do get that, if I can't, I'll just measure it and put it in the comments. Yeah, it doesn't look like I can. I'll measure the distance across on that tape, that way you know exactly which kind to get. I believe it's just 3M, it doesn't really give me a good brand name on that. I wish I could give you more on that, but basically any generic painter's tape that you have will work, and the measuring process will be the exact same. I'll go ahead and measure that though and give that to you in the comments, that way you know exactly what to get. And I'll leave a parts list in the comment as well, that way if there's anything I left out there, which more than likely there will be, I'll put it there. Alright, with all that assembled, we should be good to go. Last thing for me would be to thread this wire back underneath the scope. That way I can wrap it around and put it back onto my camera assembly. This wire is actually adjustable. If I was to go back into the stock back here, I could pull it. I guess that came off easier than I was expecting. I could go back in there and get that USB, pull that wire a little bit back out. That way I could take out that slack But for now, the rifle's well completed. All you have to do is insert your heavier gram BBs and you're good to go. I'll give you a little demonstration of how it shot after I reassembled everything. And then, if you have any questions, post them in the comments. Thank you all for watching. Alright, and this is the last bit of clarification. This is the Tokyo Marui VSR-10, and this is the testing video right after this video was taken. Alright, and this is the test shooting of the Tokyo Marui VSR-10. I did take a couple of shots to adjust the hop effect after I removed it. Now we should be good to go. A little bit high. Bit of a breeze caught that one. Okay. And that's the mag. Shooting pretty well, I'd say.